we are pursuing policies that were crafted together with Mandela as we started our democracy in 1994. What we've been doing is to enhance those policies, deepen them. And I believe if you look at South Africa, and perhaps if you take the continent of Africa, in 19 years, we have made such progress that no country in the continent has ever made in the history of decolonization.
South African President Jacob Zuma talking about how well his nation is doing almost 2 decades after apartheid. Welcome into Hour 2 of America's Forum. Here at the Anchor Desk, I'm J.D. Hayworth. We're joined from Newsmax LA by our good friend Larry Elder. Larry, we thank you for weighing in. And we should also note that here on the Anchor Desk, we're joined by noted South African economist and commentator Daniel Silke to talk about the progress South Africa has made in recent years. Daniel, thanks so much for joining us on America's Forum.
It's great to be with you.
Now, when you take a look at this, 2 decades after the end of apartheid, now Nelson Mandela has passed on to become part of history. What's the status? What's going on in your nation?
Look, I think to give a balanced account, there's been progress in South Africa in 20 years. We've provided basic social services to 40 million South Africans that simply did not enjoy the same benefits as the small 5 million white minority over the previous 50, 100, 200 years. So we've had to go and we've had to suddenly bridge that gap between the haves and the have-nots in South Africa by providing this kind of social service to the majority of South Africans. And we've done it. We've rolled out housing, we've rolled out electricity, we've rolled out clean water, we've created job opportunities in a sense for many South Africans. But when we look overall at South Africa, South Africa is not an island unto itself. It's a very competitive global economy. South Africa is one country amongst hundreds of countries, all competing for foreign direct investment. And of course, countries are becoming a lot more competitive globally. And South Africa has done some things correct, but it really hasn't, I think, fulfilled its complete promise and hope that we had 20 years ago.
Daniel, the whole world, of course, rejoiced after the fall of apartheid, but I'm looking at crime. It seems to me crime is as bad, if not worse, than it was under apartheid. If that's the case, is that not discouraging outside investors?
Look, I think that we have much more information today in South Africa about crime. And I don't think it's though there wasn't crime in the past. There was certainly crime. There was also corruption in the past. A lot of this now is available, the information is available to us. I think what discourages investment into South Africa is a complex and difficult labor regime in the country. Our trade unions are quite militant. We lose a lot of we have a lot of strikes, and we lose a lot of productive days to strike action in the country, and I think that's one of the key issues why there perhaps is a reluctance to invest in South Africa. I think too that we have, as I've said, a very complex global environment and competitive, and investors can choose where to invest. They can invest in Mauritius, they can invest in Ethiopia, they can invest in South America, in Southeast Asia, and South Africa really has to have competitive economic policies that make the country attractive for foreign investors. And I'm not convinced we're as competitive in that sense as we really should be.
Less than 2 minutes in this segment, Daniel. You've been very generous with your time, and we're going to keep you through the next segment as well. But you touched on labor unrest. What, close to a quarter of people without work in South Africa? Maybe the estimates are higher for certain demographic groups. What can be done to quell the labor unrest?
Well, we have a militant set of trade unions in South Africa that are, broadly speaking, linked into the ruling political party. And the ruling African National Congress is a political party made up of the trade union movement. So when your government is linked to your trade union movement, it's more likely to protect the rights and interests of that trade union movement in terms of labor legislation. And I think that linkage, that political linkage between the unions and the ruling political party really protects, in a sense, the labor unions. It makes them more powerful. And again, in a globally competitive environment, countries across the world are grappling with just how much power should trade unions have, how disruptive should they be. And yes, we've got 25% official unemployment. It's over 50% unemployment rate for young people in South Africa. And this is really the issue that we have to grapple with.
So the bottom line, don't look for labor union reform anytime soon, given the political equation at work and political realities in South Africa. Daniel, you're very gracious with your time. We're going to ask you to stay. We're going to find out more about South Africa, some of the surprises that may not occur to us here in the United States, as we continue our conversation with Daniel Silke here on America's Forum. Back now on America's Forum to continue the conversation with South African economist and commentator Daniel Silke, and from Newsmax LA, our good friend Larry Elder. Daniel, what would surprise Americans about the nation of South Africa?
Look, I think South Africa is very often regarded as some sort of distant place. It's a very modern, thriving country, 50 million people. It's a fully functional democracy, a multi-party democracy. It has commerce and industry which is world-class. We are ranked amongst the top countries in the world when it comes to our regulatory environment, the soundness of our banks, for example. We are ranked number 3 in the world in terms of the soundness of our financial institutions. And I think that would surprise many people in terms of how efficient our services and financial sector is in South Africa, and the linkages that sector has now to the African growth story, and how our own internal domestic business in South Africa is expanding globally and internationally. We've got some great companies in South Africa. One of our big companies in the country has an interest, and a very strong interest, in the Chinese internet provider Tencent. And it's a South African link for that matter. So I think there are so many intricate linkages, business linkages, that extend outside of South Africa and globally that really would surprise Americans.
Daniel, terrorism, of course, is a problem worldwide. It's a problem in the continent of Africa, especially Kenya and Nigeria. It does not seem to be a problem in South Africa. At least I don't hear any headlines about it. Is it not a problem in South Africa?
No, we've got problems of unemployment, we've got problems of industrial unrest, but we do not, fortunately, have problems relating to terrorism, in particularly the El Shabaab or Boko Haram style of terrorism that we have seen in other parts of the African continent. South Africa does now form part of a peacekeeping force, an international peacekeeping force on the African continent, but fortunately it's not an issue for us, and let's hope it remains such.
Now, Daniel, you mentioned China earlier, and China's internet company. I'm curious, just how much economic involvement are we seeing from China in your nation of South Africa?
Look, as you know, China's been very active across the African continent, more and more so. Not to the same extent in South Africa. We've got a very advanced domestic economy that, to a degree, makes entry into South Africa more difficult for outsiders. Nevertheless, there's growing interest from China, particularly in our minerals and mining sector. And even in our financial services sector as well. Our current president, President Zuma, is a lot closer to China politically, and South Africa, of course, now is part of this BRICS group of nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and now South Africa, this club of nations that brings South Africa a lot closer to all of those nations in terms of attracting investment.
Daniel, investors love political stability. When there is change in power in Africa, is it smooth?
Well, I certainly think that we've seen an improvement in that. Now, if we can just differentiate Nigeria for the moment from South Africa, we've had a very important election in Nigeria where a democratic change took place at the ballot box, which is historic for Nigeria. In South Africa, interestingly enough, we have not yet been in a position where the sitting government, the existing government, is defeated by an opposition political party, as occurred in Nigeria. We've still got to go through that sense of political maturation in South Africa, where an incumbent is defeated by an opposition political party. And I think in South Africa, we're moving towards that in the medium term, and South Africa will be viewed very closely in terms of its political stability as we grapple with one political party attempting to defeat another political party. And the jury is still out as to whether we in South Africa can achieve what Nigeria achieved only in the last few weeks.
Well, speaking of politics, and let's issue the caveat, you can't represent the entire nation, but I'm curious, the view in South Africa of President Obama, especially now that he's been in office for more than 6 years, is there satisfaction? Is there identification with President Obama? Was his conduct during the Mandela Memorial Service snapping selfies with the Danish Prime Minister? What's the impression of our president in South Africa?
Well, I think if we had to look at the impression sort of fairly and objectively, for most South Africans, I think they were relatively happy with the advent of the Obama presidency, and certainly there was added identification given the African-American origins of President Obama and we being an African country. And on the basis of that, there was a synergy, an affirmation of what Americans did in terms of choosing Obama as the first African-American president. Beyond that, though, I'm not convinced that South Africans think too deeply about the performance of President Obama, and the president has not really had any dramatic influence in issues surrounding Southern Africa. And in fact, one might add that he hasn't really played that much of a role on the African continent as well. So we're a little removed for the moment, but we will watch your coming election with great interest.
And Daniel Silke, we will watch what happens in your home country, and we hope you'll come back to visit us again. Thank you very much for an update on what's happening in South Africa, the economic challenges, the political challenges, and the tremendous promise of your nation. We appreciate it very much. And America's Forum continues right after this.